Welcome back to another episode of Friday Night at the Barbell. This is Season 2, Episode 10. We have Jared Maynard on for you today. He's a PT, coach, and survivor. This episode is brought to you by WRPF Alabama. Alright, today I've got Jared Maynard with me, a fellow PT, if I can say that yet. I'm not quite there, but on my way. Powerlifter, I am there, so fellow powerlifter. Coach, rehab specialist, I would say right now, dad, athlete, just all the titles for you.
All the things.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, Bryant, man. Thanks for bringing me on.
Absolutely.
And thanks for bearing with me, because we've been trying to get this lined up for a hot minute. We finally made it happen.
You know, time zones, schedules, everything gets in the way of good times.
It's a whole thing, but
Yeah.
The stars aligned, and here we are.
Yep. And your coaching service is Unbreakable Strength, is that right?
Used to be, yeah, and
be.
we'll probably get into it. Now it's Rebuild Stronger, because I've merged
Rebuild.
Unbreakable Strength with my now business partner, John Flagg, who's also a fellow coach and powerlifter and clinician. So Rebuild Stronger, that name stays, and we've essentially formed, like, I guess this is the coaching equivalent of a super group, the musical super group. So
Yeah.
that's how I'm looking at it anyway.
That's nice. Yeah. The Temple of the Dog over here.
That's right. That's right.
So can you give us a little bit of a background of your journey into physical therapy first? Because I think that probably came a little before where you're at now.
Totally. So going back to probably high school, it definitely was high school, maybe a little bit before that. The big question of what do you want to do after school, or where do you want to go to university, and what do you want to study, all oriented towards, like, what do you want to do. I wanted to be a doctor, and this was probably mid to late high school. And then upon realizing how much schooling and time that actually took, I realized my heart wasn't in it enough to really stand a chance at getting through undergrad and med school and residency and all that. So the next routes that seemed like they fit were physiotherapy, chiropractic, or even high school teaching, because I had a couple of really impactful high school teachers that I was grateful to have. They made a lasting impression on me. So as far as, like, the healthcare route, physio and chiropractic were kind of the things that stood out. And then I went out, I shadowed a couple of physios in a pretty standard outpatient orthopedic kind of clinic. I liked what I saw. I thought that was pretty cool to be able to work with patients, be able to be immersed in healthcare and science, and, like, help people feel better, deal with their injuries, all that stuff. So I decided on that route, and then that led me to study kinesiology and for my undergrad, and then pursue PT school after that with a year in between, because first time I applied, nobody took me in. Second time I got one yes, which is all I needed.
That's all you need.
So that's kind of what started me off in the PT direction.
Nice. Were you in athletics at all before?
I was, yeah. So for going back to my childhood, I was not an athletic kid. I wasn't given to it very, very naturally. So my parents were really trying to find something that I would take to, because I'd be in the basement during, like, beautiful summer days, just watching TV, and they wanted me to go and be active and do something productive that way. So tried a bunch of things, basketball, tennis lessons, a whole bunch of other stuff. And the first thing that actually stuck was martial arts.
Oh.
So Kung Fu was the thing, and stuck with that for about 3 years. And then just stopped. It was kind of an anticlimactic, unceremonious stoppage. But then we had a family movie night tradition. Friday nights, we'd pile in the family room and put on some movie to watch together. So Remember the Titans was on cue one Friday, and only my dad had played football. So we had to stop during each game sequence, like, multiple times, and ask, like, Dad, are we happy about what just happened? What actually did just happen? Can you explain this? But watching that movie was the thing that made me want to play football. So signed up for a summertime football camp, and then I went up for my school team. This would have been my sophomore year, and played for 3 seasons. And yeah, once we reached this era of finding something or some things that I enjoyed doing physically. That also, I think, bolstered my direction into like healthcare, and then more specifically into PT, just because, thankfully, I never had really big injuries to deal with. I had a hairline fracture once in my fifth metacarpal from Kung Fu because I hit my instructor in the face with a glove, but hit with the wrong knuckle. We were sparring. It was fine.
Yeah.
But like that was the extent of the injuries. Didn't really get too many things through football. But it was still really appealing to be able to, help people stay active, stay athletic, and even return back to some level of function. So that played into the decision a bit.
Yeah. That's normally I feel like the direction of kinesiology, exercise science. And now, like, there's 38 people in my class, and 35 of us are kinesiology, exercise science majors. So,
yeah, it seems to be the biggest base and a pretty typical or a common path, and
yes.
It seems to also have the usefulness in giving a good breadth of directions people can go into. Most people, as you've mentioned, as I found for my kin class, like 80% of us were trying to get into the same PT schools, which, made for some competition for sure. But I also know people with kin degrees who went into like consulting and like all their very, very varied fields.
Yeah. It is, it's not one of the easier degrees, but you still can go do a lot with it. Like, it does open a lot of doors. It's not as niche as it seems sometimes. And then, how did you find powerlifting along the way?
Yeah. So my powerlifting journey began with the end of football. So played for 3 seasons, and between football seasons through the rest of the academic year, I didn't really do much. Didn't do much until the summer between my junior season and my senior season, because the coaches did fitness testing at the end of our season, and the arrangement was we had to come back during summer camp, and we had to be better than what we tested at. And if we were better, we got to play. If we weren't better, we didn't get to play. It wasn't quantified by how much we had to get better, but they set that standard for us. So I would start lifting in my parents' basement with the equipment that they had. And really that was like based off of like a bodybuilding book that my dad was fond of. And, I was just trying to get a little bigger, a little stronger for the football field. And then at the end of the senior season, now suddenly I needed something to do with my time for 5 days a week for 2 hours at a time.
Yeah.
So just kind of kept up with the lifting that I'd started in that summertime prep phase. And then following high school, getting into university, I was a commuter student. So I lived about 2 hours away by bus from my university campus. So that meant that if I wasn't in class and if I wasn't in the gym, I was on the bus either going to school or going back home. So yeah, the gym became one of like the 2 or 3 places that I would go when on campus, and just really training for more aesthetics than anything. Aesthetics, and I knew the health benefits and all that, but wanted to get bigger and leaner and all of this. So at the end of undergrad, this is 2012, which is a time when like natural bodybuilding was kind of having a renaissance, especially online on YouTube. So I remember watching people like Omar Isuf, who I had the pleasure of coming back on the Iron Culture podcast with for the second time recently. But Omar Isuf, Matt Ogus, Chris Jones, and I just am dating myself. But if anybody knows the YouTube fitness scene in like 2012, this should bring back big waves of nostalgia. So I wanted to get into natural bodybuilding. Dr. Eric Helms, also from 3DMJ and Iron Culture podcast. I became aware of 3DMJ at this time, and or around this time. So figured, all right, natural bodybuilding. Let's friggin' make this happen. And signed up with a coach. This leads to about a 2 or 3 year period where I find out that for me at that time, bodybuilding is not a good match due to a couple of reasons. one, the coach that I had fucking sucks. Not from a technical knowledge standpoint, like he had a slew of results to speak of, but from a communication standpoint and from in my estimation, being an actually good coach, absolutely abysmal. Led to quite a lot of issues that led to some serious psychological stuff that I had to work through at the time. Also, I was dealing with some pretty disordered eating. So never diagnosed formally as having an eating disorder, but definitely in a binge cycle facilitated by the necessity of like being so focused on the minutia of nutrition, trying to get really lean. And I just wasn't ready for it. I don't know if I'll ever really be ready to get to that level. But again, people like Dr. Eric Helms and the 3DMJ team talk about the necessity of having these conversations with people who want to get into bodybuilding early to try to help guide people and empower them to make good decisions. And for me, trying to force this, it came to a head, and I realized like this was really taking a toll on my mental health, my physical health, and just competing in bodybuilding wasn't a thing that I was going to pursue anymore. I never ended up competing. I got fairly lean at one point. But then after breaking up with bodybuilding, I'm in this space where I'm going to keep training because I need the gym. It's an anchor. It's part of what I do and who I am. And then that's where powerlifting becomes essentially like the rebound relationship, where I start here. Well, I've known about powerlifting before, but now I start looking at it a little bit more seriously, seeing people like Chad Wesley Smith, seeing people like Brandon Lilly. These are just some of the biggest influences that I came across early. And I thought, all right, this feels like a better match, because now we're not talking about a sport where, you know, if you end up being competitive, you're up on stage and you're being judged based on your aesthetics and how good you look compared to the next guy. This is more objective. Granted, there's still subjectivity for sure, but these are the standards of the lifts. Did you do them according to standard? You know, yes, no. And it didn't require me to be super lean. Like, it was something that I could just focus on getting stronger in. So that was really appealing. That started me off on the powerlifting road, 2014. So that would have been between first and second year of PT school for me. And I've stayed with it ever since. Made plenty of mistakes and done plenty of stupid shit along the way, which now part of my hope is to save people from the time and headache and expense of that same sort of stuff. But love powerlifting. It's very much a good fit for me. It's changed me in a lot of positive ways. I can't think of it changing me for any negative ways that I've seen so far. And it actually, you know, unexpectedly played a huge role in helping me get through the most dire portion of my life, which was getting really sick last year, which, you know, we might get into, but being strong enough helped me survive the IC.
Yeah, I think people don't put enough weight into being able to lift weight, like in general, you know, general fitness or powerlifting, having that background going into anything unexpected like you had is a real benefit.
Huge benefit.
Do you remember what it was about powerlifting that had you hooked, besides like it being an outlet, a continuation of everything else?
Yeah, it was the objectivity, you know, compared to physique sports or bodybuilding. And then it was kind of an interesting thing. I loved my time playing football and my experience with team sports in that respect. I also really loved the notion that whether I succeeded or failed in powerlifting, it was because of me. And, you know, same thing applied for bodybuilding, but this just felt like more of a fit, something that I could actually get into and that it would be a good match here. And I have always enjoyed, well, once I got into that phase of finding physical activities that I took to, that I found engaging, I've enjoyed pushing myself and really seeing how well I can do. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm the eldest of 5 kids, so chalk it up to some oldest child syndrome, being a perfectionist and all this stuff. But that was the case in academics. I always tried to do as best I could. Same thing for you know, physical endeavors. So powerlifting was appealing that way. Plus, I mean, the people who are the strongest, they looked pretty fucking jacked. And who doesn't want to be big and jacked, you know?
Right. You look at those guys and you're like, oh, so I can look like I lift and also lift.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly right.
And I wish Carson, he's the co-host with me, I wish he was here because he's like, he always brings up that 2010 era fitness, YouTube fitness, and Matt Okus is actually his favorite YouTuber still.
That's
he goes
awesome.
back and watches old videos.
Ogus just won his pro card, if I saw it right.
I think so, yeah.
Big
That's
thing.
insane.
Big, long time coming for him.
Right. 10 years, 20 years in the making.
Yeah, man.
So you also picked up coaching along the way. When did that start? Here, if you can recall.
Oh, I can recall it exactly.
Nice.
So this would have been 2016. Excuse me. So at this point in time, I am 2 years or about a year and a half removed from PT school. I'm a freshly minted PT. I'm working at a clinic in the first city I moved to out of school, and found a really cool crew of people at the gym that I trained at, which was down the street from my apartment. Met some lifelong friends who I'm still friends with now. One of whom, his name's Nick. He was a bodybuilder. He actually competed. He worked with Jeff Alberts from 3DMJ, and that was part of Nick's journey. But we met at the gym, just struck up a friendship, kind of just as anybody does at the gym. And then because of Nick and myself meeting, and then also kind of coming into the circle of other people, my friend, and at the time, coaching business partner, his name was Conrad's girlfriend, both of whom were competitive and elite powerlifters, record holding and competing at the world level for Conrad at least. And I was getting more into powerlifting and heading towards the competitive route. Nick was saying like, hey, look, if you guys start coaching, I want to be your first client. So late 2016, that was the year. So we started working with Nick. Nick is still a client now.
Nice.
Grateful to say, and a dear friend as well. So that's really when coaching began. And I think it was Dr. Quinn Hennick from Clinical Athlete, who is also a friend and a colleague because I'm part of the Clinical Athlete team. But I think I heard him say it first, where if you're not looking back on what you were doing 5 years ago or 5 years plus and cringing, you're probably not growing a whole hell of a lot. And that's exactly what I think of when I think back to in the early days of coaching, where it was very much a figuring it out kind of phase. We did some things cool or like decently. We did other things. There was a lot to be desired.
Yeah.
But those were the early days of coaching for me.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. I think back and specifically to things I would have done or was doing back then when I started. It would be like the intensity, rep ranges, set numbers, volume in general, like all of that is like very cringy. And then sometimes I look at the exercises, the actual movements, and I'm like, I wonder why I stopped doing those. Mm-hmm. Maybe I got too in the weeds with the research and what is optimal. Because like the basics work pretty damn well for most people.
Yeah.
I know this year in particular, I kind of looked back and I was like, why did I stop giving people close grip bench and only doing wide grip? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And yeah, I got too specific. I
can feel John Flagg, again, my now business partner and good friend. He's shaking his fist at the sky and he doesn't know why, because he loves close grip bench. I also love it, but his motto that I've adopted is you can never have too much tricep.
Right.
But your point stands, right? It's helpful to look back at what we were doing, and sometimes it is the question of why did I stop doing that? Because that still holds value probably here.
I definitely fell into a rabbit hole. I think mainly it was due to just being in PT school and being busy, and then like maybe seeing something and holding on to something for too long.
I think that's part of it, man. I mean, I think for development as a lifter, as a practitioner, as a coach, be it in the fitness or strength worlds or the clinical worlds or both, I think that's a necessary thing. where we need to hold that space for experimentation. Sometimes we've got a clear enough reason as to why. Other times, especially if it's experimenting on yourself, you just can try shit for the sake of trying it and just seeing how it goes.
Yeah.
And, I think that's a necessary piece of discovery and developing our own algorithms or thought processes as far as, if this situation with these factors, how do I go about designing a program? What are my steps? And, I think it matters as much to find the stuff that doesn't work or really doesn't go the way you thought as it does to find the stuff that tracks with how you thought it was going to.
Really agree. I think I was aided by, I picked up the data-driven strength guys whenever they kind of first started growing a lot. And that really helped my kind of decision-making in the moment for powerlifting. And then now, I think I kind of got away from that a little too much, just with getting focused on the wrong things with people. But it's been good to kind of come back around.
Totally.
Bring it back down to reality. So in your powerlifting career, I do want to know, I imagine I'd have a good idea of it, but what's been the most memorable moment in powerlifting in your journey?
I'll split it up into, memorable moments from the competitive side for me, from the coaching side for me, and then maybe generally in the digital coaching experience, because that's been how I've coached most people. I'm going to start with me. Start with me. Most memorable moment probably have been the last couple, because getting really, really sick last year, which again we might get into, but really starting at truly ground zero, bedbound, coming off of life support for 5 weeks, had the last treatment that didn't work, and then somehow making a miraculous recovery afterwards, losing 40 pounds of muscle, not being able to get up and walk, not being able to talk because I had a trach, and needing to just learn basic functions and recover enough to get home and then keep recovering. And I knew I was going to get back in the gym. I refrained from saying when I was going to compete until I felt good enough to do so. So it took me 9 months, give or take, to get to that point. But earlier this year in February, so 9 months after leaving the hospital, in and around that time, signed up for 2 meets. The first one back was May 25th of 2024. And then the most recent one was this past Saturday, August 10th. And hit post-hospital PRs for the squat and the bench press on both. This most recent one, I chipped both of those. I hit lifetime PRs on the deadlift and the dots on the first one. I hit another or more lifetime PRs on the deadlift and dots the second time around.
Nice.
And it felt like a win, certainly for myself, but also particularly for everybody who had supported me and my family, because there was a massive outpouring of generosity in terms of finances. People would drop by with tons of food to fill up the freezer so my wife and daughters didn't have to cook too much. People donated money, I think I might have said. They donated blood and plasma because I needed a lot of that. Just all sorts of stuff that was overwhelming in the best way. So between them, the medical staff that helped me out in the hospital, some of whom follow me on Instagram and asked permission to share how I was doing with the people who would have seen me in the ICU or the other wards when I was there. I was like, absolutely, because it meant a lot to them to see what their work and their effort had allowed me to do. So it felt like a shared win that way. And yeah, this most recent meet, actually both these meets, my wife and my daughters came out, they were cheering me on. So being able to hear that motivation on the platform. And then this past weekend, I was able to win my class. So coming away with a nice hard plastic gold medal. It psyched my daughters out so much. They were so stoked on it.
Nice.
So it was a shared family win like that.
That's awesome.
Thanks, man. So that's me. Coaching-wise, one of the most memorable moments I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go with two of them. One of my clients, she and I started working together in 2020. She had a hip surgery, and she had competed once or twice before the hip surgery, and she wanted to recover enough and compete at nationals, CPU nationals in 2022. So it gave us 2 years time from the time we started working together. Nothing resembling a straight shot from start to finish. Tons of ups and downs, lots of curveballs. But fast forwarding 2 years, nationals was in St. John's, Newfoundland on the East Coast. And this client and I were there. I flew out to see her and to coach her. She made weight, and she made weight by the skin of her teeth. We just made it. And I remember vividly sitting in the atrium of the hotel where this was held. She's eating her pre-meat meal, and she's just smiling because we fucking did it. We got her to nationals, and she had a hell of a day. She left everything on the platform and performed incredibly well. The other one is also in St. John's, Newfoundland, at the same hotel, because later than that year, in 2022, IPF Masters Worlds was held there. And one of my other clients from Finland, who she and I had worked together for a similar length of time, she qualified for Worlds. She flew out. I flew out as well. It was the first time that we got to meet each other after working together for a couple of years. And I got to coach her on game day, wearing the honorary Team Finland jacket and polo, both of which I still have. And she took 8th in the world in her class. So two memorable moments for sure.
Yeah. That's incredible. Just the journey alone. I mean, starting in 2016, you probably never thought something like that would happen. Right.
I mean, I'd hoped for it, but it was a burgeoning hope where I'm beginning my process as a coach, and I'm just trying to figure out, what does a coach do? What does a good coach do? And trying to, cross my T's, dot my I's, and just make sure I'm good. I'm decent enough on the basics. And then I remember when my athlete from Finland reached out. She wasn't my athlete yet, but she reached out on Instagram, like, all right, cool. I've been following you for a while. This is my situation. Like, what do you got? For me, it was like the scene from The Office where Michael Scott freaks out because Pam's going into labor. Oh my God, it's happening. That was legitimately what was going through my head. And we figured it out along the way.
I haven't quite got there yet. All my athletes are still in the state, pretty much.
I mean, it takes one of them, and that changes probably. But even still, with the level of competition at state level meets, it's stiff sometimes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's definitely got that way here. We're like, 470 or better dots is what wins you most competitions in Alabama now, even on the tested side.
Yeah, it's wild. Some strong folks out there.
It is. I remember in my first competition was in 2018, and it was like, if you had a 400 dots, you probably could have won it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now it's like you got to have 500 minimum, almost.
Absolutely. And you get people, again, above the state level, but still. John, who I've mentioned here, and then also our good friend and colleague, Dr. Sophia Veras. She's a USAPL pro powerlifter, doctor of physical therapy. She's closing in on 600 dots. She won Equip Nationals. She competed both in the full power and bench only, if memory serves. Took home the gold in both, I believe. But just wild, her being one example, a great example, but one example of just how crazy strong people are getting.
Yeah, that is insane. We actually had a competition here the same day, August 10th, in Alabama. I kind of work with WRPF in our state, and we had one of our top lifters. Well, she is the top lifter, female in our state. She competed locally I think it was one of the ones she first did when she started, and it's in her hometown, so she wanted to just do it because she's an untested lifter, but she had a 592.
Just crazy.
And she's a 130, I think she weighed in at 132. No, 135. So it's like...
Are you at liberty to say who that is? I'm curious.
Yeah, her name's Andrea Armstrong.
Was she at the Ghost Clash or no?
She is going to do the Ghost Clash. She hasn't done it before.
I got it. So, yeah, it doesn't sound familiar. I commentated at the Ghost Clash 3 in April this year. And I was trying to run through, I don't think I remember Andrea's name, but she would have been on the pro day.
Yeah, she hadn't done it yet. She just got the not the invitation, but the like, you know how they do the thing where on Instagram where you can put someone's name in to get pulled to try and yeah, she got that invitation. So
Right on.
she'll probably be going for first. I mean, this was a local comp and she's 135 and pulled 462, I think, and missed 470. So like it's wacky what people can do these days.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know Andrea, but just from the sounds of it, it sounds like she's more than ready for some competition that would abound at places like the Ghost Clash or American Pro, probably.
Yeah, she's going to give them a run for their money, and it's going to be interesting. What's also interesting, you know, she's probably current, I would think, maybe third in the world, like in terms of dots. Maybe second untested, but we actually have the number 2 all-time men's untested as well in our state, which is unexpected. Like Alabama, our powerlifting scene is not that big, not anymore.
But apparently, Alabama's strong.
Right.
You're producing some strong stock out that way.
Yeah, Jawan Garrison is like the number 2. He's number 1 all time. I think he beat John Hack's total at 181 to be all time, and then he's like number 2 all time behind John Hack now in terms of total and dots. It's fucking weird out of nowhere. These freaks.
Yeah, man. I'm just trying to claw my way back into some respectable numbers over here. But
Right, me too. Me too.
Right.
Different kind of injury,
Yeah.
different situation, but same deal. Still coming back. Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying the podcast episode. I just wanted to come on here and thank WRPF Alabama for being our sponsor for this episode. I'm going to show you how to find the website, wrpfalabama.com. If you're watching, you can see it here in the browser. Upcoming meets. Next up is the Maverick Mayhem 3 tested and non-tested event. Registration's open. Go sign up October 12th. Saturday, October 12th in Millbrook. That's outside of Montgomery. Another good site to know about. If you're listening, that was wrpfalabama.com. Another good site to know is the Facebook page. So the Facebook group actually is private, but they update everything about Alabama powerlifting in that beyond just meet preps. Also welcoming new members, everything you can apply to join anytime. Heidi will get you in there. So thanks to WRPF Alabama for sponsoring this video. Come out to the meets, support the other lifters. We appreciate it. Thanks. So, can you give any tips for people that are trying to balance their professional life and being a parent with competition and probably coaching too?
I can absolutely speak to it in the hopes that it's useful, but knowing that everybody's situation might be a bit different. For me, my wife is an absolute rock star. And when it comes to being able to balance things, I'm not actually sure that I balance anything. I'm not sure if balance is a real thing, but it feels like a moving target. And depending on seasons of life, like I remember when we had our first kids, because we started with twins, because why start slow? That was like being thrown into the deep end, and we had to figure that out. I still trained, but training looked different then than it looks now, or than it looked before. Same thing when our third daughter came around, things changed then, and the same story around our moves, our life, developments. But one, if you're in a relationship with somebody else, be it a significant other, partner, spouse, open communication for us has been absolutely critical. And it's been an ongoing thing to get better at. So Ashley is very supportive of me training. She knows how much it means to me personally. Also the fact that it's a large part of what I do professionally. It makes sense. And even so, it's still important for both of us to check in with each other and make sure that I know what her expectations are for herself, whether it's exercise related or just how she is hoping I'll show up as a husband, as a father, and how we can distribute the roles in the house. And that's been something that I've had to get better at, and I'm still getting better at. And she does the same for me in terms of checking in, what my hopes or expectations are. And that's been the most critical thing for us. The second most important, I'd say, is if training consistently is an important thing for you. Cool. Defining what that actually means for you right now is going to be critical, because training consistently when you're fresh off of having a kid and you're getting next to no sleep and you've got a day job and you've got to do XYZ, that might be 2-3 sessions per week for like 30 minutes to an hour. And it might not look like the kind of training that you're used to pulling, but that might be necessary for the time and place. So I think being realistic and specific in what you're hoping to achieve, and then cross-referencing that with the time and the energy that you actually have on a daily and weekly basis, and still expecting curveballs to come up, is really needed, at the same time as making that commitment. Like, yeah, there's always going to be a reason to put off the workout, or always going to be other things that you could be doing. So if it's important to you, understand the why, and then figure out the how. And yeah, those details kind of come together differently at different times for different people, but that's what I've seen and felt to be the most important for us.
So being good and getting better at communication, being good and getting better at planning and scheduling.
That's what it comes down to, pretty much. I'll plug one of my favorite books of all time, because it pretty well single-handedly improved my marriage as well as my coaching. Never Split the Difference. I'm looking at it. It's over there on my shelf. But Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss is a phenomenal read. And it's all about negotiations, which is just communication. And I read that book in probably 2018 or 19, maybe earlier. And yeah, I reference it at least once or twice a week in various conversations. So that'd be my recommendation for anybody who's interested.
I like it. I know you have videos of your kids in the gym with you, not only kind of pseudo spotting, but also getting their workout in.
Yep.
How important do you think it is to show them what it means to actually be a lifter in the gym and going through that voluntary hardship that we put ourselves through?
Okay, I'm going to soapbox a little bit here, because I think at baseline it's important. It's important for me because lifting and the voluntary hardship, which I very much identify with, has been transformative in so many ways. It's taught me how to deal with failure. It's taught me how to come back after failure, how to step up to something that is difficult, that you don't know for sure that you're going to succeed at, but you try anyway and give it your best effort. It's taught me the value of hard work and what that does for you, not just in terms of how you look and what you can do, but also how you think, how much you have in the tank to give to people. Because when you invest in yourself like that consistently, you get results that you can't buy, that stick with you for a good chunk of time. And you have more that you can say yes to. You have less that you have to fear. You get to be more solid as a person in whatever roles you fill in your life. And that's massive. It has been for me. And that certainly plays into how I show up as a husband, as a father. For kids, again, at baseline, I think it's really important to set that example as best we can. One, from the health and longevity standpoint, we know that habits formed earlier in the lifespan have impacts down the road, for better or for worse. And then also from a character development standpoint, we know from the research that resistance training for youth, for kids, is safe so long as it's appropriately dosed, so long as the kid is interested, so long as it's managed that way. But plenty of research around that. So the outdated stuff of like, oh, you're going to stunt their growth. No, you're fucking not. It's fine. I'm going to heat it up. But I have 3 daughters. And what I've found through coaching for however many years it's been at this point, 8, 9, through coaching a lot of women and hearing their stories about how they were not only not encouraged to get into the gym, but actively discouraged by coaches, by family members, by people in their immediate circles. And when they were in the gym, how they felt like the odd ones out. They were not welcomed in by other gym goers. And the real impacts that has on an individual level, identity-wise, in terms of physical health and fitness, but also societally. When it comes to aging-related changes, you look at osteoporosis and osteopenia, it affects men and women, but it affects women more. At a certain point, if you have a fracture, we're talking, typically longer into the lifespan in your older years. If you have a fracture in your pelvis or your femoral head or neck, a fracture like that is an actual death sentence because of the complications involved afterwards. So high stakes. And we trace that all the way back to the attitude societally that we have, particularly towards women and girls, being welcomed into environments where they can build strength, particularly the gym. There's a lot, sometimes people might roll their eyes at it, but it's still a fucking massive disparity, and it has real impacts. And for me, I want to make sure that my daughters know that they belong in the gym as much as anybody else. I also want to make sure they know they're going to probably get some flack from some stupid meathead dudes, and that they're able to hold their own and probably outlift those same stupid meathead dudes. So all this to say, it's really important for me to immerse them or to expose them to this environment. I'm very blessed to be able to have a home gym where it's really easy for them to come down when I'm training and we hang out together. They also got the chance to experience the meet day environment this past weekend at my meet in May.
Nice.
So I would be making the effort regardless to try to get them into this space. And I also think it's important for them to see me not just talk about how this is important, and to see their mom not just talk about how this is important, but to actually do this stuff, which we both do. Because kids care more about what they see you do than they care about what you say. So, yeah, this is part of why it's a central thing for us. So, there you go.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I think it's always cool to see parents including their kids in the gym, even if it's, they're just hanging out and like Mike Toucher. Anytime I see him post it, it's more like his kids are distracting and bothering him, but at least they're there, right? So
yes,
yeah, it's always good to see and fun sometimes when it's something like that.
We have to, it's 100% true. We have to balance it. There's that word again. We have to adjust depending on the day. Like as I was prepping for this most recent meet, if I have a heavy day and I'm trying to work up to a top set and I really need to focus, sometimes there are nights where my kids have to head upstairs, either for the whole session or for at least that part of it, until I can just, have a little more brain bandwidth to be with them. But yeah, it can be challenging. It absolutely can be
challenging and beneficial, all in the same boat. Just like the best things in life.
I agree.
Let's flip it around a little bit and talk about your HLH situation that we referenced a tiny bit. But can you? I don't want to try to pronounce it because I'll just butcher it like I did last night. But can you tell us what it is and just give us a little synopsis of what happened?
So yeah, the full name that HLH stands for is hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis.
Yes.
And
beautiful.
I've practiced. So it's a rare disease. It was described to me as autoimmune, or as an autoimmune condition by my medical team in the hospital. It's not a true autoimmune condition. It's technically a hyperinflammatory syndrome, but it presents, autoimmune-ish in some capacities. So I'll come back to this in a minute. But for me, January of 2023, we came back from visiting my parents for New Year's Day. Next day, I started to feel a little sick. Didn't think too much of it because, it was cold and flu season. And my daughters and wife started to get sick too. A week later, they were better and I was getting worse. So went to my GP. We thought it was a sinus infection because there were sinus symptoms as well as fever and chills. Got some meds. They weren't doing anything. things got worse. I had insomnia, which I'd never had before. My lymph nodes were swelling to the point where in my head or my neck and shoulders, it felt like running my fingers over a little mini mountain range. And went to a smaller hospital nearby. They diagnosed me as having mononucleosis, which was strange because I'd never had mono, nor had my wife, but apparently I had it. And then 3 or 4 days later, my wife looks at me and she's like, "You're yellow." As in my skin was jaundicing, and we knew that something bad was going on. So went to a larger hospital a little further away, and within 6 days of being admitted, which I was immediately because my heart was racing, blood pressure was spiked, and damn near passed out in the ER. Within 6 days after that, I was on life support in the ICU, on dialysis, on a ventilator, had so many IVs and blood draws going on every couple of hours at this point. And after image and test after test, we finally landed on HLH as the diagnosis. So HLH has two main categories. There's primary, which has a genetic component. Taking one step back, what HLH is when the body's immune system, particularly lymphocytes and another one of the cells is escaping me at this point in time. But the immune system is attacking the body's healthy cells, especially red blood cells, which leads then to organ failure, and it is quite a deadly disease. In the primary version, which again is genetic, that usually shows up in infants and children, and you have to have a bone marrow transplant to have a chance at curing it, along with the other things in treatment that are involving chemo and corticosteroids and other things. I didn't have that version. Mine was not genetic. Mine was secondary, which can be caused by either an infection, which was the case for me, the Epstein-Barr virus, which is the virus that causes mononucleosis, led to the HLH for me. So, caused by either an infection, a cancer, or a different autoimmune condition. Treatment is following a similar path: chemo, corticosteroids, monoclonal antibodies, plus whatever other treatments are needed to treat the complications, and there were many. But yeah, this landed me on life support for 5 weeks. We ran through all the treatment options, and I was still getting worse. We had the last one administered. I continued to get worse, to the point where there were conversations being had between my parents, my wife, and my medical team, preparing them for me dying that week. And there was a lot of prayer. There's a faith aspect to this. But after that last treatment, I made a recovery that I wasn't supposed to make, to the point where it earned me the nickname Miracle Man from some of the staff members that worked with me in the ICU. So yeah, I'm skipping over a bunch, but it was after those 5 weeks in the hospital, it was another 2.5 months, so 3.5 months total in the hospital of recovery and convalescence, and learning how to speak, breathe, walk, swallow by myself again. When I say square one, I mean it. And that's where we started. And obviously the fact that we're having this conversation means that by God's grace, I was able to get back home, continue to rehab, and this was a long journey with lots of ups and downs along the way. But we're here. I am free and clear of HLH, not free and clear of challenges, both fallout from that and then some other ongoing things. But yeah, it's been quite the harrowing journey, which, tying it all back together, strength training literally saved my life through this, because since I couldn't eat on life support, I had an NG tube to administer medications and some nutrition, but I was so sick that they couldn't give me much nutrition because I just wouldn't handle it, couldn't process it. So I went in weighing about 193 pounds, and when I woke up in the ICU, I weighed about 150. And the 40-pound difference was the muscle that I built over the years of being in the gym for training for football, and then aesthetics, and then bodybuilding, and then powerlifting. And doctors told me unless I had that on my frame, we wouldn't have made it.
Yeah, because wouldn't have had it. It would have had to come from somewhere else.
Exactly, and there just
Been
wouldn't have been
very-
enough fuel,
Yeah.
stores ready to kind of be drawn on.
Yep. I I don't know when I first followed you, but I'm friends with Wyatt, and then that's how I found John, and then you, and it was before that happened though. So it's been, or no, I might have found you right when you started recovery, to be honest. But yeah, it's been pretty incredible to watch, and I know even beyond the having muscle mass and that saving you, like some people mentally would never recover. And the fact that you're back to powerlifting and now setting, post-hospital PRs and all-time PRs again, I don't like to use the word inspirational because most people that are inspirational don't like that, but it really is. Like, helps give perspective, especially when, I tore an adductor, which pales in comparison. And for me, a lot of people don't like that, but for me, that helps. When I can see, someone else got through that, okay, I can handle this.
I appreciate that, man. And that's honestly a key motivation for me sharing all of this, where all of this happened. So now I have this journey that I'm still on, that is still really unfolding in a lot of ways, and much of which that has happened. My hope in sharing it is so that it can be an example of what's possible, for one, that it can be inspirational, motivational, and I've heard that from a lot of people, and I'm grateful for it. My mindset here is I do try to be humble, and the best description of humility that I've come across is saying things as they are. So I do believe there's power and there's use in sharing the highs and the lows, and the mundane that has been a massive supply for me. And just always hearing from anybody else that it's having some sort of positive impact, I'm grateful for. So thank you for saying that.
I think a lot of people can take a lot away from it, right? I mean, same way I can. It's just tough sometimes to think, you don't want to shrink your own problems. It's relative. But
Absolutely.
at the same time, I'm more of an absolute problem guy. So when I see someone that can't walk and they're still in their powerlifting, or the guys that lose their leg in the middle of their life and they're still going to the gym, I'm just like, okay, my shit's not that big of a deal.
It helps, man. It absolutely it has a role. An example of that for me still is Nick Lavery, who's, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a Green Beret, excuse me, and he was while on active duty, I believe in Iraq, he was wounded pretty grievously. He lost his leg, whether it was lost in the attack or amputated after, I can't quite remember. Excuse me. But massive wounds, lost the leg, told he would never return to active duty. His response, and he could tell a story way better, but effectively boiled down to him saying, all right, bet. And he's an active duty, I believe he's still currently active duty, but he certainly returned as a Green Beret. And yeah, he, along with many others, for me still, they help to put things in perspective. And I think that perspective is important, regardless of, what the issue is.
Yeah, we have a guy from Alabama, same deal. I think he was in Iraq. It was Iraq or Afghanistan. He lost his arm and a leg. His name's Noah Galloway, but he's since then, I think he was on Dancing with the Stars, in fact. But
Amazing.
Since then, he's kind of, his life is better than ever. He's turned it around. So same deal. It's pretty interesting to see. I've seen him a few times just out and about, just because he's from Birmingham and it's not that big of a city. So
That's awesome.
It's pretty cool to see. I am familiar with who you're talking about. I just didn't know him by name. I've seen that story. Let's see some of the fallout of recovery, so to speak. I know there's a big challenge you're facing ahead that's kind of you've come to terms with and have another journey on your hands. But can you tell the people about that a little bit and just kind of what you're expecting, how you expect things to change in the future? Because I imagine you'll still be able to powerlift.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have apparently won a lottery that I never really hoped to play, which is the rare disease lottery. Excuse me. So we talked about the HLH. That was, again, not genetic for me. But I do have a rare genetic disease called choroideremia, or CHM for short. And that's a mutation. Could be hereditary. Sometimes it's just spontaneous, but it means that the mutation means that retinal cells don't produce a certain protein that they need to. And then that leads to progressive vision loss and retinal cell death over time. So we've known about that we've known I was night blind since I was a kid. We had the official diagnosis since I was about 20, give or take. So at this point, it's going to be coming on 14 years. But yeah, it starts off with night blindness, and then progressively over time, the rod cells get affected first before the cone cells do. So it leads to essentially kind of like a progressive tunnel vision. And it's usually, the decline is fairly steady and slower up until about 40, but to middle age, and then it accelerates past that. So for most of my life at this point, certainly since the diagnosis and even before that, appointments and follow-ups with ophthalmologists have been a pretty routine thing to monitor how things are going. And choroideremia is uncurable, untreatable. There's interesting and somewhat exciting research being done, particularly around gene therapy. That seems to be the most promising thing. There's also cell therapy, like stem cells in particular. There's been some research around like prostheses for retinas and stuff like that. But gene therapy is the most promising, but there's still a whole lot of stuff to be ironed out before we've got something somewhat reliable. So this has been my prognosis since, again, I was in my late teens, early 20s. When this was a time when all of my friends were learning how to drive, getting their full licenses, some were getting cars, and I wasn't able to do that because I was cautioned against that, just in case I didn't see somebody on the road, and it was a safety thing. So it's been an ongoing process to process the situation, and it honestly continues now. The difficult thing about putting two rare diseases in the same person is that no specialist has any concrete answers as far as what's going on. Through the HLH, my vision quickly declined. Initially, it slowly returned close to baseline afterwards. It worsened again last fall and winter when I had pneumonia and had been to a bunch of ophthalmologists. No one had any ideas. Did all the tests, all the imaging. It was the clinical equivalent of a shoulder shrug. Like, it could be this, we don't really know. And then, my vision improved a little bit, but it's worse than it used to be. And I'm pretty convinced at this point that because choroideremia has an underlying inflammatory mechanism that leads to the cell death, and because HLH is a hyperinflammatory syndrome, there's probably a connection between the two. So what it means is I'm going blind. There's nothing anyone can do about it right now. And that's a hard thing, where the raw truth of it is it's still something that I'm not at peace with. I've processed enough to move forward most days here. I'm certainly in a better place with the processing than I used to be. But it's still raw, and it still sucks. And it's one of these things where I'm not the only person who had these shitty hands dealt. People have other shitty hands. And that's where, again, I think the perspective is helpful. But it's something that I've got to deal with right now. And what I see changing, no pun intended, is a shift in how I operate. I'm still going to be involved in coaching, and this is where tech can be very useful. And we were in conversations with a couple of developers about how can we potentially still leverage tech so that I can help people get stronger. How does that look? It's going to mean that I have to learn how to navigate using a white cane because I'm still sighted. It's a weird in-between where I'm too blind to be considered normal, and I'm too sighted to be considered blind. And I can still see people, I can still navigate through the day, but my periphery is eaten away. So using a cane to get around is going to preserve more independence for a good chunk of time. It's going to change a lot of the what and the how for me, but it does not change the why. It does not change the fact that I have a family depending on me and who I want to get up and serve and protect and nurture. It doesn't change the fact that I have a powerful story that I want to share for the purpose of making positive impacts for people all around the world at this point. If anything, it'll catalyze some of the things that I want to do, like more public speaking and, maybe doing that more often than not. Because thankfully I don't need to be sighted to be able to use my voice. And powerlifting, I've been looking into that, particularly for what exists for blind or visually impaired athletes. And while powerlifting is not a Paralympic sport, there are Paralympic sports for blind and visually impaired athletes. But blind powerlifting has its own world championships and stuff like that. So I fully intend to stay under the bar probably till the day I die in some way, shape, or form. And in the meantime, while I still have some fight in me, which hopefully will be for a while, I'm going to try to do some cool shit and keep getting stronger.
I like it. I think 100% you should be in some public speaking realms because, for one, your story is so good, but two, you're good at it. Like, you make good content, you speak well, and you have concise points that people can relate to, I feel like.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It's something I've been working at fairly hard for a period of time, and yeah, I've started to put some thought into what the next chapter will look like, particularly around the speaking front. And I'll be flying out actually to Austin, Texas, not next week, but the week after, to appear on a podcast as a guest, which might be the first foray or one of the first into this.
I like it. Well, I appreciate you coming on with me then.
Happy to, man.
The small fish.
Hey, it still matters, and I'm still grateful for the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Thank you. On top of that, I follow someone else who is blind that does powerlifting. I don't remember off the top of my head who it is, but it is interesting to see them. You wouldn't really be able to tell if you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he does it so well. And then, so you're going to be bench pressing in the Paralympics then?
Maybe. I looked into it actually, and for powerlifting, sorry, I'm glad you said that because I have to amend my earlier statement. Full power squat, bench, deadlift. Right. That's not a Paralympic sport. Powerlifting, which is bench only, is a Paralympic sport, and the criteria to be eligible for that include having some sort of condition or situation that limits your use of your lower body.
Okay.
Which, as of right now, I'm grateful to say I don't have. I've got some other challenges.
Yeah.
So powerlifting for the here and now or foreseeable future won't be my thing, but I'll still cheer them on as they do their thing on the Paralympic stage.
Fortunately, you won't be able to do that.
Yes. Yeah. Who knows? Life is crazy and nothing's guaranteed. But for here and now, not in the cards.
Well, and that'll be interesting to see. I can already see it now, and ironically, white bearded, old as hell, can't see a damn thing, still going out there and doing it.
Love it. That's what I'm going for. I want a white or gray beard that's long enough for my wife and my daughters to braid.
Yes.
They want to put like some leather in there and make it look Viking. Yeah, I don't have Nordic ancestry, but damn it, I'm going to make people think I do.
You can at least look the part. It'll be fine.
That's right.
We actually have a guy, David Webb, in Alabama. I think he's like 67 or so, but he just last year came back. He had 3 strokes in 1 year, and now he's back to powerlifting, setting national records again. And he's, the nicest guy on the planet.
Naturally.
Goes a long way.
That's awesome.
So, kind of speaking of that, we'll kind of wrap it up a little bit, but do you have any goals as of now for powerlifting with all the stuff you have going on? I mean, what's your next goal with it?
Yeah. So more short term, I want to compete twice a year. I haven't had the ability, or yeah, haven't been able to compete twice a year for as long as I have been competing.
Yeah.
Period. Started competing in 2016, and then we had our kids in 20. Or got married in 2017. Had our kids in 2018, and just a series of things. So I want to compete regularly. I'm thinking about maybe March next year. Is when I might eye some things up. But my squat and bench, actually, I realized this morning, my bench that I did this past meet ties the best bench that I've done in competition. So we're back there. I'm about 12, 16 pounds off of my best squat in competition, so we're not far there, and we're past what I had done for my best pull. So building on that, is really what I'm eyeing up. I want to be able to qualify for and compete at nationals as a competitor. Been to nationals a bunch of times as a coach for my own lifters and for other lifters. I want to be able to make it there myself, and at some point compete on a world stage. And there's plenty of work to do because, like we were talking about before, lots of strong people all over. But
Yeah.
that's really where it's at for me right now.
I like it. Very solid. Good plan. And now you have the complex process to get there.
That's right. That's right. And thankfully, I've got the support to do it both at home with my wife and my family, then also with John and our team at Rebuild Stronger, because John plays a big role in my programming, as does our other coach, Dave. So being able to have people that allow me to show up as just athlete when it's time for me to train in the evenings. I've given people what they need through the day. It's super helpful, and I wouldn't have made this much progress and be in this spot without their help and the help of the inner circle.
That kind of transitions to my last question for you. What advice do you have for somebody that's going through maybe not something, or maybe something worse, like what you went through, like just a significant life challenge or health event, something like that?
My advice would be give yourself the space to acknowledge that it's hard, and there's no need off the bat to compare your hard to somebody else's. If it's affecting you, if it is unpleasant, if it's causing distress or it causes real trouble for you, give it the space, give it that acknowledgement. I think it's an important piece to actually begin to move forward. The second piece is, to the best extent that you can, open yourself up to being helped. And I recognize people's access to help is going to vary because of a number of factors. Don't create another barrier for yourself that doesn't need to be there by being stubborn as shit and thinking you got to do it yourself. Thinking, especially if you're a clinician like you and I, where we think we have to figure it out ourselves, or what good are we as PTs or coaches? It's bullshit. That's ego. Yes, there's value in being able to figure things out. You also learn a shit ton faster by learning from somebody who's been there, done that many more times and for longer than you have. So if you actually want to learn, if that's actually the thing, then consider looking for help from somebody. If you want it, right? Just know what the expectations are for the choices that you're making. For me, learning to open myself up to help, both over the last year and then before that, has been the single biggest reason for success, and success at the rate that I've had it in my own recovery, in my development as a coach, as a lifter, as a person, because I've found people and resources who can help me, and I've opened myself up to that. So I'd point there.
Cool. Sounds good. Anything you want to hit that we might have missed, or?
I think
Cool
we got
with
it, man.
All right, sweet.
I appreciate the invite and being able to make it happen after a long time. And
Absolutely.
if any of this was useful, if anybody wants to, touch base afterwards, Instagram is probably going to be the easiest way to get a hold of me. So jared.rebuild_stronger is my handle. And I'm an open book. So if you got any questions about what we touched on here, you want to talk shop, you want to marvel at the strength of people in Alabama specifically, let me know. Just shoot me a message, and I'd love to do that.
Sweet. Appreciate you for coming on. This was fun, and I really liked our talk. I thought it was awesome.
Likewise, man. Appreciate the opportunity and hope it served the audience.
Yeah, I would imagine it has. All right. That has been your Friday Night at the Barbell. Peace. Hey, everybody. Just wanted to come on and thank you for watching or listening to the podcast, wherever you get podcasts at. If you haven't already, go ahead and give us a like, a follow, and a rating on whatever service you use. We'd really appreciate that. And you can let us know in any of the text boxes or comments or on Instagram, wherever you can. Let us know who you might want to see on the podcast next. We're going to try and make that happen. We got a lot of good guests coming for the rest of this year in 2024. And if we can make your suggestions possible, we want to do that for you. All right. Thanks. Appreciate you guys.